Hello and welcome back to everyone that's tuned in to the American Ultra Stock channel. Thank you so much for being here with us today. It's a special video. Personally, it's one of my favorites. It's the time where we look at what was all said and done and we give the awards for the USMNT players. Mostly, again, I'm not going to say players abroad because the core of our group is playing abroad. So just to start off with, the ones that aren't really up to opinion, these are just facts. Braden, would you tell us who was our top goal scorer of all the whole season for the USA?
Yeah, and like Yuri said, obviously these awards are basically they're only going to players that were abroad this past season because obviously they follow the regular traditional season format. There is one award that we're going to have towards the end for the MLS Player this season, just to not leave them out, but for the most part, it's abroad guys, which is why our top goal scorer, interestingly enough, was someone who I don't think anyone would have expected, and I think you can maybe even argue if it counts or not because it's at kind of a low level. Charlie Kelman from Leyton Orient in EFL League One. He won the Golden Boot in that league, 27 goals in all competitions. If you want to say only big leagues allowed, completely fair, that would be Christian Pulisic and Ricardo Pepi tied, both with 17 goals in all competitions. Both of us, for context, predicted Haji Wright at the start of the season. So maybe if he didn't have that injury that kept him out for a few months, maybe he would have been up there. He finished with 12. A lot of the people in the comments actually also predicted Haji Wright. So he was definitely a popular one. But I think pretty straightforward. Pulisic, Pepi, our top striker, and our top player.
Yeah, straightforward with those, but congrats to Kelman and Leighton Orient, a great season, and nice to see some new names popping around. I would say that it counts. Arguably, it's at a good level. And now moving on to the top assist maker, top playmaker, top assister, whatever you want to call it. Who was it, Braden?
Yeah, once again, we have two players tied, actually. It's both of them on 10 assists, and both of them are actually in good leagues. Christian Pulisic, again, making another appearance, double-digit goals and assists for him this season. Incredible form, as always, for AC Milan. And Anthony Robinson, a bit of a surprise here from left back with Fulham. He had an incredible season, particularly the first half. He was insane. I remember for the longest time, he was top 3 in assists, only behind Mo Salah and Bukayo Saka, which as a left back especially is just such an incredible accomplishment. I think some other players may have passed him as the season went on because his assist making did kind of fall off in the second half of the season. Obviously his overall form was still pretty good, and we know he was playing through injury as well, but really incredible season for Jedi Robinson. Great to see him tied there with Pulisic. You got it right. You said Pulisic. I said Malik Tillman, which is interesting because he got, I think, 12 assists in his first season with PSV, and he went down to 5 this year, took on more of a goal-scoring role. So a pretty bad prediction for me there. But good job to you, Yuri, for getting it right, and good job to Pulisic and Jedi, of course.
Yeah, I felt like I went with the safe option there, very conservative to choose Pulisic, but it paid off in the end. So I'm happy with that. Now we're gonna pick. We're gonna start with the ones that are more fun and more optional right here. It depends on what you value, but for the breakthrough player of the year, I'm curious to see if we're gonna have the same one. I have a sense that we would, but who do you have, Braden? Surprises on this one?
Yeah, well, I'll start with saying the players that we picked at the start of the season. You had a really, really good one, Nathaniel Brown, obviously coming in from Nuremberg into the Bundesliga with Eintracht Frankfurt. We know how incredible a season he had. The only question is, again, still, it's the same question that we were asking back then. Will he be a USMNT player? We don't know. As of now, Poch and the USSF clearly do not seem to be very interested in having him as a USMNT player, so maybe he counts for this category, maybe he doesn't, but if he does, I mean, I think we all know how great of a season he had. Argument for Bundesliga team of the season even. I think he was so good, such a huge breakthrough. My pick, not so great. I said that Gaga Slonina would become a USMNT player, so definitely not a great prediction there, although I did also say in that section that Noah Banks would break into the Augsburg first team, so I'll give myself a little bit of credit for that one. As for who I'm actually going to pick, I think there's a lot of different options here. I think we had a lot of players. I mentioned Kelman as the golden boot. I think he definitely had a big breakout. Nathaniel Brown, of course, was a top contender. I'm going to go with Paxton Aronson, one of my favorite players, of course, being a Philadelphia Union fan, and he just absolutely erupted. I think this was definitely his coming out season in Europe for Utrecht, finally getting first team football. We had a little bit of that second half of the season last year with Vitesse, but now at a high level, he had 15 goal contributions across all competitions for Utrecht, leading them to fourth place. I think it's safe to say he was probably their best player this season. So that's who I'm going to pick.
Yeah, and I said surprises because I had a sense you were going to pick him. But at the end of the day, I don't feel like this one is up. I feel like I'm sad in a way that there's not much debate. It has to be Paxton Aronson, and that only goes to show how well he did. Yeah, he had a good moment with Vitesse, but that was more of a glimpse of what was yet to come. But with a better squad around him, I think he really found himself this season. Not that he wasn't finding himself in the past, but he had the ability to flourish, the opportunity to flourish, and he did so well. I'm really excited to see what we're going to do with him with the national team because a player with a lot of promise. It's nice to see a lot of people recognizing him as well, getting a chance with the national team, which I think that he was overlooked the entire season, to be honest. So he could have been more involved. But at least he's there now, and I'm really happy for him. I feel like the majority of people would have him as their breakthrough player. Now, a category that I think is really fun as well. It could be, I feel like we're going to have a lot of contenders for this in the next season because we have a few players to do that. But comeback player of the year. I'm curious to see who we picked. There would be, I don't recall what I picked originally, but who was it? And Braden, who do you think was the comeback player?
Well, while we're on the topic of Paxton Aronson, we actually both picked Brendan Aronson to be our comeback player of the year. Obviously, we know he had a bit of a tumultuous tenure with Union Berlin last season. He showed a little bit more promise towards the end of the season, which I think is what led both of us to pick him as the comeback player of the year. I think he was one of three main contenders for this award in my eyes. I think it was between him, Tim Weah, who bounced back from having I think a pretty mediocre first season at Juventus, to having a really good one this season. I would say I think he got 10 goal contributions in all competitions, so definitely a step up. And then the one who I'm going to actually pick as my award winner here, Tyler Adams. Obviously, we know how injury-riddled his last season was. He only actually made 4 appearances for Bournemouth the entirety of last season, which is just so sad. I mean, obviously, he had that big injury from the summer, and then it had a huge setback. He came back, got injured again. There's so many problems and so many questions about him. I think a lot of people actually, when we made the season predictions to start the year, were hating on him in the comments, calling him potentially the biggest disappointment, which we'll get to in a little bit. But he had an incredible season for Bournemouth, stayed fit the entire year, which was, I think, that in itself is worthy of comeback player of the year, but his form when he was on the pitch was really good as well. So in my eyes, he deserves this award. I think you can make arguments, like I said, for a couple other guys, but I'm going to go with Tyler Adams.
Again, I feel like it's a no-brainer right here. It has to be Tyler Adams. And I'll be honest, I was not that I was one of his critics, but I was very skeptical over how long he could stay fit when he was back because he was out for a long time, a back injury as well. So you never know how your muscles are going to, just acclimate to the high level that he was going to be expected to perform at the Premier League, one of the most physical leagues in the world. And I would just say, I know that this doesn't have too much, it shouldn't have an impact on choosing these players, but screw it. It's my criteria. I'll say it. The fact that he's going to be there for the Gold Cup just shows that besides off the pitch as well, I feel like not that he's coming back but there was some criticism over him last summer being protective of Greg, which we know he was. He spoke about it, but now I feel like even in that sense, he kind of regained his momentum as the one character that we can look at and has full-on commitment for the USMNT. Because although he had his opinions about Greg, maybe he was right. Maybe Greg was a better option. Now, also off the pitch, he's going to be there regardless. And he was one guy that could say, I'm going to take the summer off. I had a long season. No, he's not taking that. He's going to be there representing us. So I feel like that I'm going to weigh that in as well, because I feel like it should be at the end of the day, we're supporting the national team. And we're going to go now for the best transfer. So a lot of guys got moves over the summer. It's always exciting to talk about transfers. I'm curious to see I don't remember what I picked, but I'm curious to see who you think got the best one out of the bunch, Braden.
Yeah, honestly, there was a lot of good ones. I don't think there was as many high-profile moves last summer as there was the summer before. Obviously, we know like half the national team was on the move in the summer of 2023, which was kind of crazy. But we have some players that we already mentioned. Of course, Nathaniel Brown made his move to Eintracht Frankfurt. We know how incredible of a season he had there. Paxton Aronson, who we both picked for breakthrough player, of course, made his loan move to Utrecht. He's actually the guy that you picked in your predictions as best transfer. So I don't know if you're going to pick him again here, but that was definitely a really good prediction, whether you pick him or not. Charlie Kelman, we mentioned, top goal scorer. He had the loan delay in Orient. There was Santiago Castaneda, who went to Paderborn, moving up from the third division in Germany to the second, and had a very good season for them there. Mark McKenzie solidified himself at Toulouse, finally a top 5 league player. Trusty bounced back from Sheffield United with Celtic. Tanner Tessman even was actually another guy you mentioned. You said that he was going to go to Torino. Obviously, we know that didn't end up happening, but to Lyon, I think he's pretty all but an established starter there at a very high level. So definitely one you could go with. But the one that I'm going to pick is actually the one that I picked at the start of the season, and I'm not just picking it because I want to be right. I think he truly deserves it. I think he played basically every game for them this season in a very fixture congested schedule. I'm going to go for Aidan Morris to Middlesbrough. I think he just fit in so perfectly with their squad and with how they play. He really didn't put a foot wrong all season. I think one of their players of the year. Unfortunately, they did just miss out on playoffs. I think from a team perspective, they would have liked to have a little bit better of a season, but Morris, definitely no fault at all for him. I think he was a huge standout, and considering it was his first season in Europe, making the move from Columbus Crew, I think it's going to be the first of many good seasons, hopefully, in England for him. And who knows, maybe he will eventually make the jump to the Premier League, whether it's with Middlesbrough or not. But that's going to be my pick. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of good options here, so I'm curious to see who yours is.
Yeah, I'm going to say mine. There was a moment where I thought it wasn't going to work out at the beginning, not because of the player, but he's just so unlucky. But at the end, especially if we're going from a USMNT standpoint and how really we need someone to step up in that position, I feel like the majority of the fan base was very critical of him at one point. Now it feels like he should be a starter. I'm going to pick Mark McKenzie. Because if you think about it, it's a big jump to go from Belgium. I like the Belgian league, but it's a big jump to go to play in Ligue 1. I know it gets clowned upon at times, but it is a high level. It is a very technical league. It may not have the best rhythm, the many stars spread out throughout the league, but it's still a good level. And I feel like when he played against the best opposition available in that league, he did well. I know that they had a stretch. I think it was towards March. I can't remember. It was horrible. They were losing almost every game, but it was never like he was at fault. He solidified himself as a starter, which is what you can ask for the guy. And now he's going to step in to be a starter alongside Chris Richards, hopefully for the national team. It's time to go post the Ream era. And I feel like he's the guy to be that. And that's a consensus amongst the fan base. No more shouts for CCV to be that guy. So I feel like at the end, when it's all said and done for this season, he did his job. He became a starter. He jumped up a level. And he's the guy up next to be a starter for the national team. So I feel like overall, I'll pick that as the best transfer because he did the most for the player compared to where he was before it, in my opinion, at least. Maybe I'm just trying to argue right here for my pick, but I think that it's a good one. And he surprised me as well. So I'm happy to see that for McKenzie. Now we're going to go for the worst one. Curious to see. I mean, if we could mention this, it could probably be Gio Reyna, even though he didn't get a transfer. Just staying was a transfer regardless. But I'm curious to see out of the ones that moved, the one that you thought didn't work out, the one that worked out the least.
Yeah, we didn't actually predict worst transfer at the start of the season, but I thought at least that it would be a fun thing to throw in there. You have to take the good with the bad as well, so I think it's important to be objective and look at both sides. There's a few contenders for this for me. Thankfully, not as many contenders on the high-profile side as there would have been from the previous season, which is definitely a positive. One that stands out to me is Jordan Pefok, and he actually has kind of two here because he went back to Union Berlin from his loan, scored, I think, 0 goals for them in like the first half of the season. Then he made his return in January to his hometown club of Reims, of course, the club that Fuller and Balogun was at when he had that incredible season in Ligue 1. And he scored a couple of goals there, but they did ultimately lose the Coupe de France final to PSG and then get relegated to Ligue 2 the next match day. So definitely not the best season for him. There's also someone who's a little bit closer to home, but still technically abroad. Fidel Barajas, moving to Chivas, completely killed his career like we see so many times with these MLS to Liga MX transfers. Caleb Wiley, I think, deserves a shout here. Not not even just the Strasbourg loan, because I do think that was a little bit unlucky because of the injury, but he did officially make his move to Chelsea over the summer, and I think long-term for his career, that could end up being the worst. Gabriel Slonina, of course, went to Barnsley. That one did not work out as we all thought it might. Leonard Maloney made the move in January to Mainz, really didn't get much playing time, deserves a shout. But the one I'm going to pick ultimately is going to be a bit of a shame, because he looked like he could have potentially made the Olympic team, just missed out, but he had come off a pretty good first real season in Europe. It's going to be Jonathan Gomez, made the move to PAOK in Greece after a pretty solid season with Mirandes in the second division of Spain. And I think, as we all know, he has not played at all for PAOK in any competitions. He missed out on their squad entirely for the European competitions, and I think he has single-digit appearances for them this season. His career is basically done. He's probably going to go to Liga MX now. It's just a shame for someone who could have stayed at Mirandes for another year on loan from Sociedad, and if he had, I think they probably would have been promoted to La Liga, because if you look at the table, they only finished 2 points out of the promotion spots, the automatic promotion spots. They finished in the playoffs, ultimately ended up, we'll see actually. They might even still go up because the playoffs haven't happened yet. But I think considering the options that he had and where he ended up going and what it ended up doing for his career, I'm going to have to go Jonathan Gomez.
Yeah, some good shouts there. You mentioned the player that I'm going to pick already, because it's sad to see what happened with Joe Gomez. And I feel like not the same happened to this player, but at one point, especially around this time last year, a lot of people were excited to see what he was going to do. And I feel like ultimately now nobody really remembers him. It's going to be Leonard Maloney. He was a mainstay at his club. You could argue he was rising up to be perhaps a legend at the club, maybe. But then now the move to Mainz, correct me if I'm wrong, but I also think he has single-digit appearances. I don't know if he played more than 3 times. It's ridiculous, really. And this was a guy that I was very high on, maybe challenging guys like Tanner Tessman, being on that bracket of being up next after Tyler Adams, who at that point we weren't sure of how he was going to be fitness-wise. Johnny Cardozo, who's still a question mark for the national team. So I thought, a workhorse like Maloney, maybe even slotting in a center back, the position that he played in on his youth days, could be a great shout, good asset for the national team. But absolutely ridiculous transfer. It's fair to say, in my opinion, it's the worst one, because it was mid-season and it absolutely wrecked his chances with the national team. I don't think that Poch even knows who the guy is, to be honest. And I know that Poch is not too aware of a lot of players in our pool, but I wouldn't blame him on this one, because he never sees the pitch. So I don't see the point for that. But it's really sad to see. Hopefully we don't have anyone in this category next season. But now we're going to move on right here to the biggest surprise. There were a few surprises along the season. A negative one, like I just mentioned, with Maloney, but for the good or for the worst, we'll go with the positive right here. The biggest surprise for you throughout the USMNT for this season, Braden.
Yeah, and just on your point, Maloney made played 23 minutes for Mainz since making the transfer in, of course, January window. I think that's a very valid pick as the worst, as unfortunate as it is. But moving on to biggest surprise, and in my mind, this one is pretty similar to the breakthrough player category, but it's different because it has a little bit more personalization, I would say, because basically biggest surprise just comes down to what you already thought about the player. Like, for example, we both picked Paxton Aronson as our breakthrough player. I think a lot of people could potentially put Paxton in this category. I wouldn't put him personally, because I've always rated him very highly. I knew what he was capable of. I thought he would have a very good season, but maybe for some people who weren't as familiar, he would be their biggest surprise. For me, it's players who kind of burst onto my radar that I didn't think already would. My preseason pick for that was Santiago Castaneda from Paderborn. I think he's still definitely a contender. I'm going to end up going with someone else, but I think he's a worthy at least consideration. Charlie Kelman, another one. Of course, we mentioned him so many times. Nathaniel Brown. Jonathan Klinsmann is going to be my honorable mention here, because I think he really came out of nowhere with Cesena. In last year, he was in Serie C. He got them promoted, or helped get them promoted, and now he was their basically full-time starter at goalkeeper in Serie B in their first season back in that division, and got them to the playoffs, almost got them to promotion to Serie A. So definitely a biggest surprise worthy season for him. My final pick, though, is actually going to be Richie Ledesma, because I think no one could have predicted what happened with him this season after so many unlucky things that happened to him during his time at PSV, all the injuries he went through, a loan to NYCFC where he barely even saw the pitch and he was really bad. He came back to PSV, he put in the work, and he returned, finally becoming a starter for them, or at least a pretty important player at right back of all places, which I don't think anyone could have told you exactly how his season would have played out before it did. So in my mind, he's a clear pick for biggest surprise. One thing that I think is kind of interesting to note is you picked Jack McGlynn, and I think that's also a pretty valid pick, because to me, his transfer in January to Houston Dynamo was one of the biggest surprises I've ever seen. So I'm interested to see where you go, but I think a lot of good contenders in this category.
Yeah, you picked the one that I was set to pick from the beginning. Well, you did pick. You mentioned him. It's going to be Jonathan Klinsmann. I'll be honest, I didn't really know much about the guy at all when he played, if he played in MLS at some point. But I've always watched Serie B, and he did really well with them. He wasn't a starter at first. He came on, and there's a lot of pressure to play for those clubs trying to go for promotion. I don't even think that Cesena thought that was going to be their goal for the season. But ultimately, he did really well. Caught some penalty saves as well, so that was really good for him. I thought that he never let them down. He didn't have the best team around him. I just liked how he commands his box. I feel like he's a very promising goalkeeper, and not too good with the distribution. But that seems to be the case with our goalkeepers for whatever reason. Maybe it's something on the way we bring them up. But I feel like overall, nobody knew about the guy, and now he's starting to get on people's radars. And I think that that is a surprise. I'll be honest, I didn't expect to be mentioning him here at the beginning of the season. So based on that criteria, I'll go with him because I expected zero. I barely knew who the guy was. Now we're going to go with the biggest disappointment. Fair to say, there are a couple right here that come to mind right away. I'm curious to see who you're going to pick.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's a few too many for my liking. I'll start with the guy who I, in the start of the season, predicted as my breakthrough player. What a horrible pick that was. Gabriel Slamina. I think a huge disappointment for him. He went on loan to Barnsley. Obviously, it did not work out for the best. He ended up getting injured, going back to Chelsea, and didn't even really play the second half of the season. Complete waste of the season for him, and now he's basically completely off the radar. He's going to need a huge year next year to revitalize himself. Rokas Pukstas in Croatia with Hajduk Split, I thought was a big disappointment as well. He had a great season for them and was looking to even potentially be on the move to Serie A, but ultimately they asked for too much money, kept him, and then basically made him have a horrible season because the manager didn't rate him, didn't want to play him. Some questionable decision making there. Gio Reyna, of course, who's actually the guy that you predicted, so I'll give you credit for that. Obviously, it was kind of a layup, but you made the pick, and he unfortunately was disappointing again. Another guy who maybe isn't even in our pool, who knows, but Luka Koleosho had a horrible season for Burnley, only 2 goals, no assists, coming off some pretty decent play in the Premier League. Balogun had a pretty poor season. I already mentioned Pifok. The guy I'm going to go for, though, is a guy that I have been criticizing a lot on the channel over the past few months. It's going to be Yunus Musa. I think ultimately maybe it's not really much of a disappointment because he already wasn't great in his first season for Milan, but I think given the fact that he had a much bigger role this year, he's definitely started a lot more games, including in high-profile ones in the Champions League, in really big matches. He was given the nod, and just ultimately, I think, in a very poor season for Milan, was one of, if not their worst player who actually played consistently. I just think it's such a shame that we're not really seeing much progression from Yunus Musa. We know he's still such a young player. He has so much time, but usually young players, as they progress throughout their years, they get better. But Musa doesn't really seem to be doing that. And he's gone from a guy who was having incredible performances in the World Cup against England, his actual home country as it stands. But he went from that to being on the fringes of the roster, I would argue. Definitely not a locked-in starter, probably a rotation player for the next World Cup. So it's just been unfortunate to see the stagnation and decline of him. Hopefully he can get things figured out in the next few seasons, but he's going to be my pick for biggest disappointment.
It's a fair pick. I think that it's fair to say maybe someday we'll do one analyzing the players' stocks, how they went from the last World Cup to this one. I feel like his is the one that went down or stagnated. No, it went down. It didn't stagnate. It went down the most, really, from what we were expecting 4 years ago. But my pick, you didn't mention him. Maybe some people will think that it's an agenda, that I'm just harsh with the guy, but it's going to be Gianluca Buzio. It's not only because I watch a lot of Venezia. I'll be honest, he's on the highest wages at the club. He's the club's biggest signing ever. And he was, let's say, at the end of the season, you could say he was arguably could be benched even. He wasn't even the second best midfielder the club has. And for the amount of money he's on, he's not a millionaire by anything. I'm pretty sure he is by now, but he's not. It's not as if he's getting so much. But when you're the highest earner for a club that's fighting for their lives in Serie A, it's expected to do a little bit more than one very accidental goal at the beginning of the season, and then another one. Fair props to him against Empoli, but overall, very quiet season. Didn't do anything out of the ordinary. Didn't do anything to warrant interest from other clubs. I'll be surprised if he gets signed somewhere. I just thought it was a very, very mess season. It's the biggest disappointment because I had some expectations for him, and that's why it's the biggest disappointment. There are some that obviously come to mind, like Gio, but in a way, I kind of expected him to let us down. But Buzio, in this way, didn't set anything alight. So I'm going to say very disappointed with how he went. And there was arguably a spot up there on the roster for grabs on that position. And I don't think he did himself any favors. Another player that some people hyped, but now nobody really talks about. And we're going to move on right here to the MLS Player of the Season. We're not going to pick a breakthrough or young player for MLS because I feel like for MLS, it only matters really if you are young. So curious to see. There are some names up there. Curious to see if you're going to go with the same one I have in mind.
Yeah, I'll make this one quick, but I just have to say I'm sorry for all of the hand movement. I'm not discounting Yuri's takes. I'm just outside, and there's a lot of bugs out here. But for MLS Player of the Season, I think there's a couple contenders here. Obviously, this one's a little bit difficult because the time period spans over 2 MLS seasons. If you're just looking at this year, you can make an argument for a player like Sebastian Berhalter, who's really come onto the scene, or Alex Freeman from Orlando City. But I think if you look at the overall body of work that we've had over the last, 2 seasons or 1 year period, in MLS, there's really only 2 options for me. First one, Quinn Sullivan, who had 17 goal contributions for the Philadelphia Union last season, is already up to 10 this season. He's having an incredible year, building on a great campaign last season, and he's one of the main reasons why the Union are currently top of MLS. But the one who I'm going to pick, I think, is a no-brainer, really. Last year's actual MLS Young Player of the Season and our current starting number 10 for the U.S. men's national team, Diego Luna, Mr. Big Balls himself. I think this one's a pretty no-brainer. He's the standout for Real Salt Lake in what has become, unfortunately for them, a pretty mediocre team. They actually just gave LA Galaxy their first win of the season, 15 games in. So not exactly great for Real Salt Lake. Hopefully Luna's on the move soon and we can stop talking about him in these MLS categories. But for now, while he's here, he deserves his flowers because he's been incredible for club and country over the last 12 months.
Absolutely. It has to be Luna. I feel like this one, similar to some other criteria, some other awards, it has to be him. How could it not be Diego Luna? And the failure for Reina to find himself a career path and the emergence of Luna with the way he's playing, I really hope that he gets a move. He needs to get a move right away. I don't care what people say that maybe another year in MLS. No, get a move. You're playing too well to be in MLS. Time to step it up. And I feel like he has the level to step up. I'm really happy that he's getting the chances with the USMNT as well and taking them. So really happy for Luna all around. I feel like it's a guy that we have been talking for a little while, and it's nice to see him step up. Really happy for him. Moving on right here, we're going to do one final one. After all of these awards, who's your player of the season, Braden? Use the criteria you want, but who is it?
Yeah, I think this one, obviously there was a lot of players who performed pretty well this season, and hopefully, or if you guys want a full-on review of how we think every single player, at least in the main pool and the main guys in Europe, performed. If you want a video like that, or maybe even a live stream like we did last year, let us know in the comments. I think we'd be more than happy to do something like that. It was super fun last year, so maybe we could see that again. But for now, the player of this season, I think there's really 3 main contenders here. You have the guys who tied for our top assister award. Anthony Robinson, of course, a left back for Fulham, such a steady presence in that position. He made Premier League Team of the Season as well, at least in the AFC, for whatever that's worth. I think he was definitely one of, you can say, at least the top 3 left backs in the Premier League, the toughest league in the world this season. And for an American to be playing that well at such a high level, I think it's incredible, especially at a mid-table club like Fulham. It's really cool to see what he's doing there. The second one, Malik Tillman. He's having, of course, an incredible season once again with PSV. It seems like he stepped up his level a little bit from last year. There was always some concerns about how can he do in the biggest of games last season. He kind of struggled, but this year he stepped it up, was so good for them in their Champions League run that ultimately got them to the knockouts. Unfortunately, had that big injury that caused him to miss a month or two, that saw them ultimately embarrassed by Arsenal after beating Juventus. So huge props to PSV for the season. And once he came back from injury, he led them to an unthinkable turnaround that ultimately ended in a second straight Eredivisie title, capitalizing on Ajax's huge slip. So again, an incredible season for him. I think you can argue that he was the Eredivisie player of the season across the entire league. I think if he was healthy the entire season, it wouldn't even be up for debate. Definitely the most talented player in the league. Probably needs a move this summer. I think he's a very worthy candidate. The third one, Christian Pulisic, of course. There's not much to say about him. Another double-digit goal contribution season for him once again. He's actually the guy who I picked in the start of the season. I'm going to give myself a little bit credit because I said he'd have 15 goals and 12 assists. Well, he had 17 goals and 10 assists. So I got the number of goal contributions right. But despite that, I'm actually not going to pick him. I'm going to pick the guy who actually won US Soccer Player of the Year in 2024. Anthony Robinson is my player of the season. I just think he's been the most consistent over the entire period of time for club and country. Is actually getting surgery, unlike a certain other player who could be nominated for this position. And that's why he's missing the Gold Cup, not just because he wants to go golfing with his friends. So I'm going to pick Anthony Robinson here, one of a couple deserving candidates. I'm curious to see who you pick because your preseason one was, let's just say it was the guy who you ultimately picked for worst transfer of the season. So not great.
Yeah, definitely not. And I remember that. But for this one, I could give it to Pulisic, but at the end of the day, I've liked some other criteria. I weigh in the USMNT aspect way too heavily to give it to him, even though he was the player of the season. I'm just saying it now. That's the reasonable take right here. But I'm going to go with Tyler Adams. Thinking about how I was thinking this season was going to pan out and what it came out to be, with him with the national team, how regularly he's been playing, getting himself back fit. Now I don't even think he has that asterisk of injury prone next to him because he's back to full shape. He did a full rehab really on his injuries and playing really well, playing really consistent. And I think that he's the backbone really of our national team. Really proud to see him spend the summer with us. And that's the main reason why I'm not going to pick Captain America, because is he really Captain America? Definitely should have been in there. But for the amount of significance that he gives to a Gold Cup after a season like this, I have to give it to Tyler Adams. And I was not a critic, but I did have my doubts about him going into the season. So I'm going to pick him for player of the season. So it's a full circle. But I'm curious to see what you guys think in the comments. Give your awards if you want to give one for each one of the criteria we had. But you have anything else left to say, Brendan?
Yeah, I just wanted to say one last thing to everyone who is still watching here at the end of the video. Thank you. And to everyone who's watched us throughout the entire channel, thank you from the bottom of our hearts. We should have said this in the beginning of the video. We'll probably say it in the next video as well. But thank you guys so much for 2,000 subscribers. It's a huge milestone for us. It might not seem like a lot to people, and it's still a relatively small number. And hopefully in a few years, we can look back and say that, wow, that we were so small back then. Look at how much we've grown, but it's really been an incredible journey. Hopefully it's just getting started. So thank you to everyone who subscribed. If you're still watching now and haven't subscribed, help us add to that total and start the journey to 3K.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, guys. We really, really appreciate it. It's been really fun. I know at times we were missing in action throughout the season, but we're going to be back on for a good season. No injuries throughout next season, hopefully. But thank you so much for watching. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, share with your friends. And again, from the bottom of our hearts, we really value each and every single one of you guys. Really appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.